Why is it that the most powerful person in the room often says the least? They sit back. They observe. They speak only when they must, and when they do, every word lands like a strike. It's unsettling, isn't it? Because in a world that never stops talking, silence feels unnatural, dangerous, even threatening. But that's the point. Silence isn't emptiness. It's strategy. It's the space where power waits to be revealed. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. In The Prince, he didn't tell leaders to be kind or honest or loud. He told them to be effective. And effectiveness, he warned, has nothing to do with volume. It has everything to do with control, not just over others, but over yourself. Everyone sees what you appear to be, he wrote, but few know what you really are. That isn't a warning. That's a blueprint. Because when others see only what you allow, when they have to guess at your thoughts, your intentions, your next move, you are already in control. The psychology of the villain begins here, with presence, with composure, with an unsettling stillness. The villain doesn't rant. He doesn't overshare. He watches, waits, and when the world leans in to listen, he says nothing. That silence becomes a mirror. People fill it with their own fears, assumptions, and insecurities. And in doing so, they reveal themselves, while the quiet one reveals nothing. There is a reason we lean forward when someone pauses before speaking. It's the same reason we fear those who don't react the way we expect. Our minds are hardwired to find meaning in sound. So when there is no sound, we panic. We assume something is wrong, or worse, something is coming. That space between words, that is where the true game begins. This isn't about being passive. It's about learning to weaponize restraint, to turn silence into signal, stillness into strength. The first rule in the psychology of the villain: never show your cards when you can make others show theirs. So what does it mean to stay quiet? It means you don't react just because you're provoked. You don't reveal just because you're asked. You let your silence do what noise never can: unsettle, expose, and command. Machiavelli didn't just observe this behavior in others, he taught it. He gave the playbook to those bold enough to use it. Not to win admiration, but to win. Because in the real game of power, it's not the loudest voice that dominates. It's the quiet presence you didn't see coming. The one who said nothing until it was too late. And that's where the story begins. When Niccolò Machiavelli put pen to paper, he wasn't writing for dreamers. He was writing for survivors. For rulers who understood that morality in practice bends to power. And for those who could see that victory often belongs not to the righteous, but to the silent. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. That line isn't an opinion. It's a warning. Power, when displayed too openly, invites resistance. But power that hides in plain sight, behind charm, behind stillness, behind silence, is far harder to confront. Machiavelli's villain isn't a brute. He's not foaming at the mouth with rage or desperation. He's the calmest one in the room. The one who waits just long enough to make you think you're safe. Then he moves. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already 3 moves behind. To Machiavelli, silence was not weakness. It was protection. It was positioning. He saw that when a leader reveals his plan, he gives the enemy time to prepare. But when that plan stays hidden, disguised by normalcy, wrapped in quiet confidence, the strike is always a surprise. And if a strike must come, Machiavelli had no patience for half measures. Men ought either to be indulged or utterly destroyed, he wrote. To wound an enemy without finishing the job invites retaliation. In the psychology of the villain, this is essential. Never attack openly when you can act in shadows. Never wound when you can eliminate. And never speak when silence keeps you safe. What's terrifying is how easily this plays out in real life. In the workplace, it's not the loudmouth who climbs the ranks. It's the one who nods, smiles, listens, and quietly pulls the strings. In politics, it's not the bombastic speech that wins the war. It's the unspoken deal behind closed doors. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't in creating villains. It was in exposing that villainy is often just realism without apology. That those who control their tongue often control the board. That manipulation doesn't look like manipulation when it arrives with a soft voice and a steady gaze. This is the shadow world of power, where perception is everything. Where silence isn't an absence, it's an asset. Where the villain doesn't wear a mask. He becomes the mask. Machiavelli's villain isn't the monster in the dark. He's the one you never suspected. Because while others talked, he listened. While others rushed, he waited. And while others demanded attention, he let them. Silence to him wasn't just golden, it was lethal. And for those who truly understand power, it still is. Silence didn't disappear with the fall of empires. It just changed clothes. Today, it wears a suit, sits at the head of the table, and speaks in brief, deliberate sentences. But the core principle remains. In the game of power, restraint isn't just respected, it's feared. Robert Greene didn't invent this. He decoded it. In the 48 Laws of Power, he exposed what others tried to hide. That silence, ambiguity, and concealment are not weaknesses, they're tactics. And the world still runs on them. Always say less than necessary. That law isn't about being mysterious for the sake of style. It's about using silence as leverage. Every word you speak is a window into your mind. It gives people a path to you. Your fears, your intentions, your boundaries. But when you say less, those windows stay closed. And in their place, you become a mirror. People start projecting. They start imagining who you are. And in that space of uncertainty, power grows. It's not what you reveal that builds influence. It's what you withhold. That's why Greene's next command hits even harder. Conceal your intentions. The moment people understand your game, they prepare for it. They resist. But if you stay quiet, if you smile, nod, appear open while saying nothing meaningful, you stay in control. People love to talk. They mistake noise for dominance. But dominance doesn't declare itself. It demonstrates itself in silence. A man who speaks only when necessary is a man others want to listen to. Not because he's louder, but because he's precise. Because he doesn't beg for attention, he controls it. This is the Machiavellian archetype updated for the modern world. Not the warlord, but the strategist. Not the sword, but the scalpel. It's not about rage. It's about precision. Silence, when applied correctly, becomes a psychological advantage few can resist. And the most dangerous part, it doesn't just work in politics or warfare. It works at dinner tables, in job interviews, in negotiations, in relationships. Because silence used well is active pressure. It forces the other side to fill the gap, to explain, to overcommit, to expose themselves. It's no accident that in business, the most seasoned negotiators are often the quietest. They speak less, listen more, let others unravel. And when they finally speak, it's decisive. But silence isn't just external. Green goes deeper. In the laws of human nature, he shows how silence begins with internal control, emotional regulation, discipline, and deep observation. People with true power aren't swayed by emotional swings. They don't let provocation dictate response. They know that in silence, information flows one way, toward them. It's not passive. It's hyper-aware. Every moment you hold your tongue, you're gathering leverage. Every second you don't react, you learn something they don't realize they're giving away. And what makes it even more Machiavellian? You don't have to be sinister to use it. You just have to understand it. You just have to stop assuming that the truth must always be spoken, that your thoughts must always be heard. They don't. The power player doesn't flood the room with sound. He filters it, measures it, delivers it when it counts. In the hands of the naive, silence is awkward. But in the hands of the skilled, it becomes a language of its own. Not every villain shouts. Not every villain glares. The most dangerous ones, you almost like, they don't raise their voice. They don't reveal their hand. They seem calm, composed, even polite. But behind that mask is calculation. And behind that calculation is something deeper. Control. Psychologists call it Machiavellianism, a trait defined not by violence or ego, but by manipulation, emotional detachment, and strategic thinking. It doesn't mean cruelty for its own sake. It means knowing exactly how to bend a situation without appearing to touch it. And silence is their favorite tool. Because silence does what words can't. It creates discomfort. It creates mystery. It creates the illusion of depth, of confidence, of threat. And in that illusion, people expose themselves. The mind of a Machiavellian villain isn't loud, it's surgical. They listen more than they speak. They pause longer than necessary. They let others fill the space. And in doing so, they gather intel, spot weaknesses, and stay 2 steps ahead. This isn't just theory. It's a real psychological profile. People high in Machiavellianism are often charming, but emotionally cold. They don't get pulled into emotional spirals. They know how to appear empathetic without being vulnerable. They don't show anger, they use it. They don't chase attention, they let it come to them. In negotiation, silence is a weapon. A seasoned Machiavellian will let you speak first, let you explain, let you stretch until you say something you shouldn't. Then they speak, briefly, precisely, and shift the balance of power without ever raising their voice. In conflict, they don't react immediately. They don't match energy. They don't feed the fire. They wait. And in that wait, the other person often burns themselves out. Because the silence forces them to face their own emotion, their own desperation, their own mistake. And this goes deeper than tactics. It's rooted in emotional intelligence, the ability to understand, manage, and influence emotions. Not just others, but your own. High emotional intelligence means knowing that not every insult deserves a reaction. That sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. It means recognizing when silence will do more damage than words ever could. That's not passive. That's not avoidance. That's power. But the truly dangerous edge of this mindset, patience. Strategic patience isn't about waiting for the sake of waiting. It's about knowing the value of timing. The Machiavellian villain can delay gratification longer than anyone else. They can sit still while others rush. They can appear disengaged while mapping every outcome. And when the time comes, they strike with precision because they've already played the scenario 100 times in their mind. That kind of discipline creates an aura. People feel it. They sense there's something going on behind the stillness. They just can't figure out what. And that's the point. Because power isn't just about action, it's about perception. And perception is most easily controlled in the silence. So what makes the Machiavellian villain so formidable? It's not just that they lie or deceive. It's that they don't need to. They let others speak, guess, overcommit. And while the world reveals its hand, they sit quietly, watching, waiting. And when the silence finally breaks, it's already too late. If silence is a weapon, stories are where we learn how it's used. Across cultures, centuries, and genres, the quiet manipulator appears again and again. Never the loudest, but always the last one standing. Consider the wolf. Not in the forest, but in the flock. In the old fable, the wolf puts on a sheepskin. Not because he wants to hide, but because he wants to be ignored. He walks slowly, speaks little. He waits unnoticed while the others graze. And when night falls, when everyone is calm and vulnerable, he acts. Not out of rage, not out of chaos, but with clarity, timing, and cold precision. This isn't just a children's tale. It's the anatomy of a silent strategy. The wolf knows what Machiavelli preached. When people feel safe, they stop paying attention. And when you're underestimated, you're free. But silence isn't always disguise. Sometimes it's design. In ancient China, during the Three Kingdoms era, Zhuge Liang faced an unwinnable situation. His army was gone, his city undefended. The enemy outnumbered him by thousands. So he did nothing, or so it appeared. He opened the city gates, climbed to the tower, lit incense, and calmly played a lute. No commands, no shouting, just calm. The opposing general arrived, saw the eerie stillness, the lack of defenses, the quiet confidence, and turned back. He believed it was a trap, because it had to be. Who would be so calm in the face of death unless they knew something he didn't? Zhuge Liang won a battle he had no right to win. And he did it with silence, with presence, with the psychology of fear, uncertainty, and power projection. It was the empty city stratagem, an ancient version of what today we might call a poker face. But in truth, it's a Machiavellian masterpiece. Power through suggestion, strength through ambiguity. Centuries later, this same idea takes human form in Shakespeare's Iago. Iago doesn't kill. He whispers. He watches. He lets others unravel themselves. His most powerful weapon isn't deceit, it's silence wrapped in trust. He acts like a friend. He says just enough to create doubt, then pulls back and lets the imagination do the rest. And in doing so, he controls not just events, but people's thoughts. He famously declares, "I am not what I am." It's the motto of the silent manipulator. Appear one thing, be another, and never ever reveal the distance between the two. But perhaps no modern figure embodies Machiavellian silence like Michael Corleone. In The Godfather, Michael doesn't rise through rage or charisma. He rises through calm, through poise. He never wastes words, never rushes a decision. When his enemies boast, he listens. When they attack, he waits. And when he strikes, it's surgical. Remember the baptism scene. He stands in church, speaking vows of peace and family. Meanwhile, across the city, his enemies fall, one by one. The message is clear. The quietest man in the room might be the most dangerous. Because he's not there to be seen. He's there to win. Michael's silence isn't passive, it's deliberate. A fortress with no visible door. And in that silence, power accumulates. Trust accumulates. Fear accumulates. That's what these stories reveal. That silence isn't the absence of strategy, it is the strategy. Whether it's a wolf hiding in plain sight, a general playing music while death approaches, a villain pulling strings without a sound, or a modern-day Don who lets others talk themselves into ruin, the psychology is the same. To stay quiet is not to disappear. It is to become unreadable, untouchable, and ultimately unstoppable. Now it's your move. Because everything you've heard isn't just theory or entertainment. It's a test. The world wants you to respond, to defend, to explain, to react. But what if you didn't? What if silence became your first response, not your last resort? Not as avoidance, but as calculation. What happens if you choose not to reveal your emotions the moment you feel them? What happens if you speak last, listen first, and watch what unfolds in the space between? This is the quiet game, and it's not for everyone. In your next meeting, let the noise play out. Let the interruptions bounce off the walls. And then speak last. Watch how different the room feels when silence precedes your words. Watch how your presence changes. In negotiation, state your offer. Then go quiet. Let the silence breathe. Let it pressure. Let it work. In conflict, hold the urge to fight back. Let your silence provoke reflection. Not to manipulate, but to observe. Because the person who controls their voice often controls the outcome. But this isn't just about external power. The real challenge is internal. Can you sit in silence without needing to fill it? Can you resist the compulsion to post, to prove, to respond? Can you become so composed, so focused, that others start adjusting to you without you lifting a finger? This is more than a tactic. It's a transformation. Because when you master silence, you don't just change the way people see you. You change the way you see yourself. You stop being pulled by every emotion, every distraction, every external validation. And you start acting on timing, not impulse. But this power cuts both ways. Silence can be strength. It can also be cowardice. It can reveal discipline or conceal fear. The difference lies in intent. So ask yourself, am I staying quiet to retreat or to lead? Machiavelli never taught silence for its own sake. He taught it as a tool, a weapon, a choice. The key is not just knowing when to stay quiet, but why. In a world that rewards noise, the one who speaks with purpose becomes magnetic. Because true power doesn't demand attention. It earns it, quietly. So try it. Let the silence grow. Let others fill it. Let the room turn towards you without force. And when you finally speak, make sure it's worth the wait.